Just there. Yep.
All right, cool. Let's go to slideshow. All right. Okay, so, well, I need it to advance when I tell it to advance. There we go. My name is Alex Polimeni. Some of you have met me before, either at the South Mountain Division meetings or the mini convention, things like that. I've been in NMRA for about, I want to say, 6 or 7 years now. I can't remember exactly. So let's see. Yeah, it'd be about 6 years now. I started doing clinics at the South Mountain Division mini convention up in Blue Ridge Summit, and so I've been doing that for a few years. So I appreciate the opportunity. Sorry, I'm fighting with my cat here because, of course, he wants attention right now. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that I've been doing for a while now and been able to share with people. I gave this clinic a few years ago at a meeting that Andrew Dodge was present at, and he asked if I would be willing to give it again over Zoom. What I'm going to be talking about today is that the Citadel Color, you have to get the U in there because it's a British company. The Citadel color system, and specifically painting figures with it. And I've done other model railroading stuff. I've done painting, or I've done fences, animals, stuff like that. But just specifically today, I want to talk about figures because that's something that I know a lot of people struggle with. The figures I like best for HO scale, which is what my dad models. So functionally, that's what I model. Are the Prizer figures. And I like them because they're hard plastic. They take primer easy. They're high detail. But I know there's all different manufacturers out there. That's just what I use and what I'll be demonstrating today. Let's see here. So yeah, jumping right into it. The paint system that I'm demonstrating today is made by Games Workshop, which is a British company. They're headquartered over in the UK. And their primary model range is tabletop wargaming, and I've been into that since the early 2000s. And sorry, trying to catch my train of thought here. So primarily, what their paints are meant for are 28 millimeter science fiction and fantasy figures. So they're not a model railroading company, and that's part of why I like talking about this, because a lot of people who have been even lifelong model railroaders don't know about the miniature paints. And there's other paint ranges besides Citadel, and I'll talk about that a little more at the very end. But these are paints that I've been using for going on 20 years now. And they have expanded just in the last decade to be an all-inclusive paint range with a lot of cool stuff and a lot of cool things you can do within their paints. That, again, just a lot of model railroaders without that sort of cross-pollination just aren't familiar with. Citadel paints come in what they call pots. They're just plastic pots that when you pop the cap open, it has like a little cup on the underside of the lid. I kind of wish they had dropper bottles or screw caps, because these don't always seal very well. But these are the paints that I'm going to be using today. And actually, let me drop in the Zoom chat here, if I can figure out how to bring it back up. I actually put together a Google document with a all the information on everything that I'm talking about here today, and it's probably in a much tighter and less rambling format than the way I'm talking about it here. All right, why isn't Zoom doing what I want it to do? Mind you, I'm supposed to be the generation who knows what he's doing with this sort of thing.
Well, I'm seeing a document that says painting figures with the Citadel color system.
Okay, yeah, that's the screen sharing. Yeah, this is the Google Doc that I want to share with you guys, but I'm trying to figure out how to bring up the chat option in Zoom itself. I guess I would have to drop out of screen sharing to do that. Let me do that real quick. Yeah, there's the chat option. I can't make this easy. All right, so I'm dropping the Google Doc in the Zoom chat. And again, that has links, all kinds of information to what I'm talking about. All right, let's turn share screen back on. All right, let's see if I can remember my train of thought here. So the Citadel color system has a bunch of different paints. They have dry brush paints. They have airbrush paints. They have something they call contrast, which is like part wash, part stain. They have a bunch of stuff, but the only ones I'm going to be talking about today are the ones they call base, layer, and shade, and that's all you really need for doing, our small, I guess, N through O scale figures. So the base paints, as I put in the PowerPoint here, they're thick and heavily pigmented, and I can't stress enough from what I have worked with model railroading paints like Polyscale, Model Masters, that sort of thing. I feel like a lot of the model railroad paints have a pigment that's closer to, like, a texture that's closer to, I guess, milk. Like it's thin paint has been my personal experience with a lot of model railroading paint. And Citadel is not like that. Generally, it is advisable, and that's actually what I was doing before I started talking. You might have seen me shaking some pots. I was actually going through and using a syringe to drop a few drops of water in some of my paints to thin them out. And with Citadel paints, that's just generally a good thing to do on a pretty regular basis if you're going to be using them a lot. But all Citadel paints are formulated. Their little tagline is that 2 thin coats is all you need to get a good coverage. And that, having tried to paint like the small HO scale figures with Polyscale, with Model Masters, I find it ends up being a little too thin. It runs. It's hard to get sort of the crisp details that you want in a small figure like that. So base and layer are pretty interchangeable. Just base is thicker. Layer is going to be your normal sort of run-of-the-mill paint, but again, it's going to be thicker than what you're probably used to working with. And the shade paints are really they really make everything come together, because they're not actually paints. They're like a wash. They have a little bit of a stain property to them, so they darken colors a little bit and they flow into all the recesses. And I've heard I've heard them referred to as talent in a bottle, and they really can be. And there was one of them that used to be called Devlin Mud was the name of it. They changed it later, but people would call it Magic Mud because it just made everything you brushed it over look great. So again, these paints are meant for 28 millimeter science fiction and fantasy. These are some of the figures that I've painted personally with the Citadel color system. A lot of the stuff that I've done here is a little more advanced than what I'll be talking about today, but I just wanted to give you guys a look at like what these paints are meant for, the models they're meant to be used with, and how that looks, or how that can be made to look. So up on the screen now is some figures that I painted these in front of people at the the South Mountain Division Minicon over the last couple of years, and I just keep them in a little case as display now. So the one on the far right, I don't think he's quite finished. I never got around to putting the shade washes on him, but the other ones, again, we're all painted by me, just at a desk in front of people at the convention. Sorry, I'm trying to catch my train of thought again. So again, you can see the kind of details that even though these paints are thicker, they are meant for fine details. Games Workshop models are very finely cast, very finely detailed. So these paints, they do get the job done. They are good for what they're meant for. I'm especially happy with that I was able to go in and do things like the large man's tie and belt buckle, the buttons on the shirt of the guy with the shovel and pickaxe, things like that. And again, with the shades, you can see the hard hat on the guy with the shovel and pickaxe. The hard hat looks a little dirty. The metal looks used, that sort of thing. The trousers on the railroad man, look appropriately dirty and used, that sort of thing. And for the bare shirted guy, again, just with I believe I used the Bugman's Glow paint and then just a shade over it. You get the definition, but it looks like real skin. And again, these look even better when it's not a huge photo. So case in point, this is a Prizer figure off. I'm not sure if they come on sprues or not, but off the sprue and painted. And again, it looks a little bit rough when you get this close to it, but I wanted to show the kind of detail that you can achieve with Citadel paints. So I talked a little bit earlier about base layer dry. So these are the paints that I'm going to be using today. And in the Google Doc that I linked y'all to in the Zoom chat, where was I going with that? So in the Google Doc, I outlined the paints that I want to demonstrate today, and to make a note of something that I touched on in the Google Doc. These paints are unfortunately somewhat expensive. They run, for the normal base and layers, they run about $5 each, and for the shades they run about $7. And I don't know why that is, why they can't price that a little lower, but I guess it's and anything in this sort of hobby is luxury goods, so they price what they can get away with. And when you're me and you've already been buying into and replacing these paints for 15 plus years, that's not so bad. But I wanted to give you guys a short list of paints you can look at that are gonna get you a lot of value and a lot of mileage, because the flip side of that is that once you get one of these, if all you're doing is figures, animals, that sort of thing, one pot is going to last you pretty much forever, as long as you put a few drops of water in it like once a year. But again, so these are the base colors I'm using, the layer colors, and the shade colors, just 3 shades that really go great with pretty much anything and everything. You'll notice some of the names. The names are all keyed to stuff in their own gaming universe, so the names are definitely unconventional if you're not familiar with the game universe. So yeah, with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing. There we go. And I'm going to change up my camera positioning here. And what I want to do is run through, I've picked out and primed a set of 6 figures, and I'm going to run through them about as quick as I know how. And I'd like to engage with you guys while I do that and take your questions and that sort of thing. So Webmaster, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute everyone. I'll get that set up.
We don't have to be.
Okay, everyone should be unmuted. If not, you'll have to unmute yourselves.
So is Alex taking questions now while he's setting this up, or
Yeah,
this,
yeah. I'm just messing with the camera right now.
Yeah, Alex, where do you typically like to buy your paints like this at?
So I live in Winchester, Virginia, and we have a Games Workshop corporate store here in town. And so that's where I usually buy my paints. That said, you can get them in the Google Doc. I put some links. You can get them on you can get them on Games Workshop's website. You can just order them off the website and they'll mail them to you. Any number of hobby shops and game stores do carry Citadel. But I'm trying to think. Not all hobby shops, because if it's a hobby shop that leans more toward like RC or trains or something, they probably won't have it. But most game stores will have it. So yeah, can you guys see my setup here? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I have my set of 6 figures here, and I know they're easy to get lost in my well-used workspace here. But as I've also touched on in the Google Doc, priming, I can't overstress the importance of priming. I have a friend who he gets impatient and he starts painting on bare plastic all the time, and I have to yell at him because it never ends well, but he keeps doing it. I do not like painting over bare plastic. The paint comes off very easily with handling, and just generally it's not going to coat as well. It'll run off the places. I do not like it. So again, in the Google Doc, I've referenced a couple of very nice ways to prime your models. As I see Pete Clark is in the chat, so as he can attest, he and I are somewhat fans of the quick and dirty. So my way of priming it is I actually put my models in an overturned box lid, and then I just spray them with the Citadel Rattle Can primer, and they get blown around a little bit, but it works. It's not great. I don't vouch for this, but it does get the job done, and that's how I've primed these. So the way I usually prime is I have a can of the Citadel black primer and the Citadel white primer. I prime the model black first, and then I go over it with a dusting of white, and it gets a nice gray. But again, that's just entirely personal preference. I would definitely stay away from I guess like any hardware store primers not meant for model use, because that's gonna usually come out a little bit shiny and clog up your details. Don't ask me how I know that. So yeah, so I've got the 6 figures here. I'm gonna start painting, and I'll talk about what I'm doing as I do it, but I'm also happy to field questions as I work. If anyone has anything they'd like to hit me with.
I had a question. You were talking about what, 27 millimeter? What's that a measure of?
Sorry, what's that one now?
You were talking about the figures being 27 millimeter, I think.
Yeah, the Games Workshop wargaming figures are supposed to be 28 millimeter. So they let me take off my headset here real quick. I'll grab one.
They're 27 millimeters high, right?
Sorry about that. I'm back. So I missed if someone was speaking.
I said they're 27 millimeters high, right?
Thereabouts, but they actually call it in their own terms 28 millimeter quote unquote heroic, so they end up a lot bigger. So,
Oh.
like case in point, that this is a big evil warrior in full body armor next to an HO scale figure. So, move those a little closer to the camera. Let me see. Can I actually get a little bit of zoom here? Yes, I can. So yeah, these models are actually quite large. So the first thing I'm doing, so what some people will want to do, you know, and again, I touched on all this in the doc. You guys can refer to it. I'll leave it up pretty much indefinitely, so you guys can refer to it, you know, as long as you want. If you just bookmark it, you can drill in the foot of the model and put a pin in there, and you'll have. I think I actually have one of those on hand. Let me see here. Yeah, so here's one that has had a wire put in the foot of it. And that's good for, you know, painting. You can hold on to that and work around it. Again, I'm lazy. My dad actually did that one for me. So I'm just going to hold the models while I work. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And you might notice, you might have just noticed that I actually lost the fingers off my right hand, as you can sort of see on the camera, in a car accident back in 2012. And I had to teach myself how to paint again. But it's always I always enjoy when I'm at the game store or whatever, and people are saying like, well, my hands are too shaky, I can't do whatever. And, you know, I can say like, well, if I can do it, you know, trust me, we can teach you how to do it. It's just practice. So that's just some words of encouragement from me to anyone who wants to try.
Alex, what size brushes are you using?
So I'm using the Citadel brushes because I am apparently a corporate fanboy. They do not have sizes on them. They're a little weird. That just says like small, medium, large. But I have in the past used equivalent ones from Micromark. I know they have a set of fine brushes. And I unfortunately didn't think to put that in the Google Doc, but maybe I can do that afterward. But yeah, again, Micromark, once or twice I've used I'm trying to remember what they call it. Something from Michaels. I've used their brushes. They're not great, but they get the job done. But again, you can see this is actually a fairly large brush that I'm using just to base coat colors in. And again, that's personal technique for me. I usually use larger brushes than a common convention would probably tell you to use. So I've got 6 figures here, and I'm going to try to block in a number of different skin tones. I have 4 different skin tones that I've picked out. So I'm going to try to get a good mix. So the prizer set that I'm using here, I think, is just called Platform People or something like that. So it's just supposed to be, you know, pretty common figures that you would always have use for in your layout. Any other comments, questions?
It's all good.
What's the drying time on those that you can
So
handle?
only a couple of minutes. These paints are formulated for impatient gamers, so 10 minutes is usually, you know, dry and safe to handle tops. If you're working in a relatively warm room, or even better, you have like a fan going, they'll dry even quicker. And these paints are acrylic, they are water wash up. They dry almost like if you have a thick glob of it that gets dried on a cap or something, like they are almost rubbery in texture, kind of like the latex house paints you might have used. So yeah, no, they dry really quickly, which is nice because I am also impatient.
Do you have to shake those up first? It just seems like you're just popping them open and going right to it.
So these, yes, these specific ones that I'm using right now, I actually, when we were just getting started, I have a old pill bottle with a syringe here. So all I do is usually when I go to use a paint is I just drop, just put 3 to 5 drops in, and then shake the bottle, and it's good to go. That's what I do anyway. Let's see, where can I put this? A lot of people like using Citadel Paints and their actual like website tutorials, because they have a lot of resources on how to use their paints, because you know they want to justify the $5 a pop for them. They recommend using a wet palette, so you would get some on your brush and then you would mix it on the palette with a little bit of water, that sort of thing. That's old habits die hard. That's not how I learned to do it 15 years ago, so I just work straight out of the pot. But that's certainly a way you can do it, and it's also, of course, easier to mix colors that way if that's your jam. If you're me, 10-year-old me hated mixing colors, so 30-year-old me also hates mixing colors. But yeah. So let's see. What skin tone haven't I used? This one. So you can probably see on the camera here, these are the 4 skin tones that I've picked out just to use here. They do have more skin tones than this. They actually have quite a good selection of different skin tones you can use, but I feel like this is, you know, good to get some differentiation on your little layout, people. That's different enough that you'll be able to notice it, you know, just at a glance or in a photograph or something. That not everyone looks all the same. And something I've noticed in a lot of like the pre-painted, you know, the figures you'll get pre-painted, is that the skin tones don't sort of have that pinkness to it that you would see, you know, in actual people. They end up looking very tan and washed out, and that's just something that has always bothered me. But just from watching me work here, you should be able to see that you know, that this does go on pretty thick. And I don't like using that word for it because it's not gloppy, but it definitely is very heavily pigmented. So that should be the skin tones on everyone. I could go back and touch up a few of them with another coat, but I'll let them cure a little bit further before I do that. So I'm going to transition to some of the other colors I have here. Questions, comments, anything?
Alex, if you're repainting a figure or
Yep.
painting a figure that came pre-painted, you try to strip the paint off, or do you put primer directly over the paint that's already on the figure?
I personally would usually just prime over it and start again. As long as it's not a thick, gloppy primer, it shouldn't really ruin any details, and then you can just slap fresh paint over that. I have never been big on stripping paint off models, but again, that's another just personal preference quirk. So I'm painting this this lady's coat yellow. I don't know if that's the best coat color out of all the ones I picked out here, but I did want to give you guys a look at what some of the little bit brighter colors that I listed, how they do look. And these are by far not the brightest colors that Citadel offers. They're actually some of the more subdued ones. Like this is probably the most subdued yellow they sell. But something else that I just don't like on even pre-painted figures is when the colors are just too bright and vibrant. It makes the figure stand out a little bit too much, and I feel like the rule of thumb for something like figures is that if you don't notice it, you did it right. If that makes sense, because a lot of times you'll have a scene or something and you don't know what quite looks off about it, but a lot of times it's just something that looks out of place, and having very bright or sometimes I've seen pre-painted models where the colors come out really glossy. That's something else that has never looked right to me. So I can already tell this figure is going to need a little bit of touch up. On the first coat, I missed painting her neck, and the yellow is going to need a second coat. But just real quick, you know, that's a large part of her color blocked in. And just for giggles, I'm going to give her a red hat. Let's see. I'm trying to watch the screen to see what's on the camera and also work at the same time. It's interesting.
Hey, Alex.
Yes.
Are you changing brushes?
No, I have not changed brushes so far. I do have other brushes here, but I have not done so.
So are you just wiping it on a rag or piece of paper when you switch colors? There we go.
Good question. So I do have, I have a bottle of water or pot of water here. So let's see if I can work the camera around. So between colors, I just switched this in here. There's actually little grates. This is, again, because I'm apparently a brand fanboy. This is Citadel brand water wash-up cup. There's little grates on the bottom that basically, you know, scrape the brush. So you just swish it back and forth. Yeah, mind you, I don't get paid to promote their product. I'm just dumb and spend my money on it. Yeah, and then I just pinch it in a piece of paper towel here, twist it, and the brush cleans up. Also, I've gotten into conversations about this multiple times. If you're me, and again, this is the way I've been doing it since forever. I actually lick the brush to put a point back on it, but I can completely understand if you don't want to risk getting some paint in your mouth. So yeah.
Which color tastes best?
None of them taste best. Some of them certainly taste worse than others. I find the grays in particular have a very bitter taste. But I mean, if I actually took the time to wash the brush out properly, I don't have to worry about that. So let's see. I'm going to move on to the looks like some type of railroad man here.
Alex, what kind of a shelf life do the paints have?
So I'm trying to think. That depends. Some of them seem to like. Just I assume it's something to do with the formulation. Some of them seem to hold up a little better than others. But generally, I would say you're probably good for probably around 4 to 5 years, as long as you just check on them like once a year and make sure they're hydrated. Some of them separate out more than others. I know that the metallics in particular, if you bought any of those, a lot of those don't seem to keep for more than about 2 years, but just the normal colors do seem to keep pretty well as long as they don't dry out. And that is one unfortunate thing about their pot design, which everyone hates, but they never change, and we keep spending money. So I guess that's our fault. Sorry, I'm trying to decide which blue I want to use on this guy. Okay, yeah, you can see this this pot has separated out. I did not shake it beforehand. So yeah, most of them I would say at least about 5 years that I can personally attest to. But these pots, as I was starting to say, these pots do have a problem with airtight sealing, and even like trying to store them upside down, something like that, doesn't really help. So that they are something that you can't just put on a shelf and forget about for 5 years. I would say check on them at least once a year. But otherwise, in my experience, like most of these paints that I'm working with here are at least a year or two old. So the railroad guy here should be pretty straightforward. I'm just going to paint him all in one color. And again, most of the colors that I've put on my list for recommendations, they are more drab colors. They are closer to, I guess, what you would see as a lot of railroad colors. A lot of their colors are very bright. So if you do want something that'll stand out a little bit more, they certainly have that. But again, that their bread and butter is science fiction and fantasy. So a lot of what you would think of as like military colors, they just don't really have. Ironically, because they make a war game as, you know, their business, but still. So again, I can already tell this model will need a second coat of the gray here, just to get a nice good cover before we put the shade on. And because I am being lazy and don't have him pinned or anything, I'm gonna have to let him cure before I can go back and paint his hat. But again, that should only take a few minutes.
Alex, another question I have.
Yeah.
Do you wash the raw figures before you frame them, or just take them right out of the box and do it?
Generally, I do not, unless they are resin, because resin models tend to have some form of mold release on them. That said, I don't think it would necessarily be a bad idea, but at least working with prizer figures, I've never really seen any need to. All right, so I'm gonna paint the jacket on this running fella here. Looks like he's trying to catch his train. He's got his jacket swept out behind him, and he's holding his hat on his head. So I'm using, it's called Dryad Bark. It's a base paint. Usually when you pop it open, you can kind of tell how viscous it is, whether or not it needs some drops of water. So this one looks like it needs some drops. And usually just, 5 seconds of stiff shaking and you're good. These are meant to be very forgiving paints.
What is the brand of brush that you like to use the most, or brands?
So I use I've taken in recent years to using just the Citadel brand brushes. In the past, I have used Micromark brushes with good effect. That said, I've never found brushes that I'm especially happy with. But I think that's more because when I'm painting on because my primary hobby is the tabletop wargaming. If I'm working on, like you can see the evil armored warrior here. He is part of a set of 20. So if I want to field them in a game on the tabletop, I need to paint 20 of him. And I tend to tear up brushes. So that's kind of, I've never found a brush that's kind of as durable as I would like it to be. Alternately, I just need to learn how to be more gentle with them. But if you're just doing this sort of work, you're probably fine with whatever.
What do you find the lifespan of your typical brush is?
The Citadel, it really depends on how much I'm painting that particular month. The Citadel brushes, if I'm doing models like this guy here, I usually get about 3 months out of them, 2 to 3 months, depending on how heavy I'm using them. But again, that's literally me painting, like, I don't know, 10 hours a week. If you put in a couple hours every evening or something. So if you're not painting that much, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Especially for this kind of work. But so the brush I'm using here is a small, I don't know if you can see that, is a small base is the Citadel designation for it. I also quite often use the, let's see here, small and medium layer brushes.
Can we see the tip on those?
What's that?
Can we see the tip on those too?
Yeah, give me just a sec. Let me try to get them angled around here for the camera. Let's see if this works.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the one I've been using is the small base. That's what I've been blocking in these big colors. The other two are a little bit smaller for getting doing more detailed stuff. There is also what they call an Artificer extra small, which compared to the one I've been using so far, is a much smaller tip brush. And I do get use out of all of them. Just when I'm, on this first stage, and I certainly don't want to run you guys too late. I just want to show, how I work with these. But at this stage, when I'm just blocking in large amounts of color, I tend to default to the bigger brushes. And I guess my personal technique is when I scoop some paint up out of the pot lid here, I'm only getting a little bit, maybe you can see it here on the camera or not, just a little bit on the tip. I'm not dipping the entire brush in. I'm just getting a little bit, applying it where I want it, and then if I need more, I just go back for more. And just working with I feel like the combination of the larger brush with the with a less amount of paint on it gives you more control when you're working with something this small. Because you aren't fiddling with a super tiny brush trying to coat big areas. But you aren't getting a ton of paint on there either. So let's see here. What do I want next? So I'm going to go back to the lady in the yellow jacket. I'm going to finish blocking in the rest of her skin, and I am actually because I want to get her her legs and her neck. I am going to switch down to one of these smaller brushes. I'm just going to go with small layer. And when I say I wear out brushes, part of what I mean is I like having a very sharp tip on the brush, and generally my technique, I try to apply where I want it, and then I draw away, so it keeps that point to the brush and the working area. I don't generally try to work forward unless I absolutely have to, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I explained that well enough. That if you draw back in your motions, it just helps keep the bristles from splaying, and makes sure that you keep your paint within the area you want to. It's like here I'm trying to get the just her legs without getting any back on the coat. And I'll have to go back and do the shoes later.
So technique-wise, do you try to do the face and arms and legs and hand stuff first, and do the larger, and cut back in with the larger areas, or how do you? Is there a sequence preference that you have when you're painting?
So that's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that. So I guess for me, yes, I do generally start with just areas of skin, just as my personal preference. But I would say, yeah, if you're so I'm trying to think. So like the other fella that I showed earlier, with the jacket and the tie and everything, I would go in and do like his white shirt, and then cut the jacket over that, because it is so. Let me see here. Yeah. So there's a model here that I hadn't gotten to yet, where if you can see it on the screen. So I've already blocked in the skin tones. I would go in. He has a coat, and he has a tie with a collar in here. So I would want to go in and probably do the shirt first, and then cut the tie in, and then cut the jacket over that, because it's easier to get these larger outer layers. It's easier to do them than it is to try to get like the shirt there. Whereas you can block the shirt in, and if you get some around, who cares? You're going to do the tie and the jacket later. So putting some thought into sequencing probably is a good idea. That's a good point to bring up. Since you mentioned that, I'm going to break out some other colors. So it occurs to me I did not put a actual white equivalent on that list, but I'm going to use a yeah, I'll go with this. So I'm actually going to do that right now. So I'm going to go in and just do his shirt first. And I guess while I'm doing this, so I did want to mention at some point that there are competitors to Citadel. I've put a list of them in the Google Doc. I have friends who do use like Vallejo game color, stuff like that, to great effect, and they do cool stuff. They're happy with similar paints to these where it's you're going to have the heavier pigment, you're going to have the quicker drying times, that sort of thing, and most of them are, I think, a little cheaper than Citadel. That said, you know, again, I bought into this paint range back in, I want to say 2003. So I've just never really had any inclination to explore, but there certainly are other options out there. Just I personally can't speak for them. So I'm going back now and putting a second coat on the Railroad Man, and I want to get at the very least I want to get him done, and the lady in the yellow jacket, just because I want to show you guys before we quit here how the shades work and how good they make stuff look. But it's important to get that good base coat of solid, strong color in there first. Or else the shades just can't do their job. And again, I do want to stress that even though these are HO scale figures, you know, that this is, you know, I'm pretty much slapping this paint on and it's coming out fine. So at this point, since I do have her skin tones blocked in and everything, I am trying to be a little more careful to make sure I don't get paint anywhere I don't want it. I know some people, when doing this, use the headsets with they're like big magnification things you wear, like oversized glasses. If any of you guys have ever met Richard Lind, I remember he would bring that to operating sessions. So he'd be reading car cards with this big apparatus on his head. But I have seen people doing this kind of work with those. And even for me, if I plan on painting for a few hours in one go, I do have a set of reading glasses that I put on just to ease the strain on my eyes. So I'm going to let I'm letting the outfits on the Railroad Man here and the woman in the yellow dress, I'm letting them cure for a couple minutes, and let's see what I want to do here, and then I'll use the shade on those. So the fellow with the cane here with the suit and tie. So I'm going to switch to the Artificer brush, the smallest one here, because I'm going to try to get his tie painted in without messing it up. Let's see here. No pressure, you're just on camera. All right, so I'm not sure how well that comes across over the camera, but again, just with the pulling the brush, I just started at the top, pulled it down, and you get a nice little line there for the that picks out the tie. And you still have that gray undershirt with the collar into either side of the tie. So I'm going to use a blue now and go over his jacket. Which I actually don't know if that's a great color for the jacket, now that I see it on there. So I'm actually going to hold off on that and pick a different color. And all I'm going to do is just let that dry and then just paint over it.
Maybe a navy blue.
Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna go with a. This is called Steel Legion Drab, and it's just a medium brown. And on these pots, the lids are clear, so you can see what color each one is, which is kind of nice because their last iteration of pots were all the lids were black. So if you had them in a tray or something, and you had to look, from the top down on the tray, you had no idea what color the different ones were. I mean, so that little bit of blue that I put on there, it's already dry enough that I can paint over it without worrying about it mixing. And I'm just very carefully cutting along the collar by the shirt and tie. And that'll do it. Okay, and I'm going to go back over to that with a wash here in a moment because I do want to show you guys how the shades work. Let's see, where did my... let me step away for just a moment. I want to grab something else to show you guys. All right, I'm back. So in my miscellaneous bin of model railroad stuff, these are some fence pieces that I've done with the Citadel paints to get the old weathered wooden board look. I don't know the manufacturer, but we got these, I think, from Mainline a couple of years ago. And they didn't get installed on the layout they were intended for because the pandemic happened. But just an example of some of the other effects you can get with Citadel paints. And I've done any number of detailing on vehicles. I've done animals. I know there's a little resin pickup truck on one of our friends' layouts that has a big sleepy pig in the back of it, and resin truck. I want to say it was a metal pig model. Again, I painted those with these. Came out great. So if you do invest in some of these, there are certainly other uses for them. And the fence pieces here were actually, I think, 2 shades of gray, a brown, and over a primer of
in hotel parking lots.
Yeah. And then I used one of the shades just to get the mud splatter on the bottom, and I did that just simply by almost a dry brush, except I was using a shade just to get that sort of mud splatter on the bottom. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and use some of the shades now, and then I know I've been talking for a while here, so I'm happy to let you guys go or keep going, whatever you guys want. But I did want to get to the shades before I let you go. So I picked out 3 that I use pretty much for almost everything. And they do have a large variety of shades that you can get different effects with, but these are the most useful, I think, for our uses. So first is your Whiteland flesh shade, they call it, and it's sort of a sepia pink, I want to say. But let's see if I can get close enough with the camera here. Because whatever skin tone you pick plus the Reichland flesh shade is what's going to get you really good looking skin tones at this scale. So I just dab it on and make sure a little bit of it does pool in like the facial features, that sort of thing. And again, it's hard. I think it's going to be hard for it to come across in the camera. But if you, and again, this is really a wash, so you do have to work with it a little bit. But by letting it pool where you want it to pool, you can pick out definitions like the jawline, the eyes, that sort of thing. And it'll give a little more definition to the skin, but without making it too, I'm trying to think the word I want to use, I guess contrasty. Because sometimes like I'll see where people will use different colors, like a darker flesh tone and then a lighter flesh tone, and it ends up looking too bright because there aren't really any hard surfaces on skin. So if you get too severe a contrast, it also looks wrong. But again, if just by just very carefully putting in just a little bit of the Reichland flesh shade, you can get really good looking skin. So that's that. And if I'm careful, I should be able to go straight to the next color. And the shades you do want to, they tend to, the pigment they do have tends to settle at the bottom, so you do want to shake them before you use them. So on the Railroad Man here, I'm going to use Null Oil, which is the black shade. And I'm going to brush that in. And what that's going to do is it's going to settle into the crook of his arm here, the details on his chest, that sort of thing. You know, and really give him that that little bit of depth that's going to make your figure stand out, just enough to look realistic on the tabletop. So it's wet right now, which is why it's glossy, but that should dry to a matte. And sometimes, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be consistent. I've never really figured it out. Sometimes the shades do dry a little glossy. So if you're already using like a flat spray for other stuff on your railroad, locomotives or whatever, and you just want to, you know, hit them with the airbrush real quick, or however you do that, it doesn't hurt if something does come out glossy. I've never had a problem with it. Finally, I'm going to use the Agrax Earth Shade here, formerly known as Magic Mud under its previous name, for the woman in the yellow dress and the man with the tie. And see, I think you can see pretty well here on the lighter color, you know, that it does pick out the details on the dress, that sort of thing, just by brushing it on and making sure it settles where it needs to. So you can pick out the details on the collar. You can add shading under the arms. And it'll pick out the folds in the cloth. And you'll end up with a figure that if you put this on the layout, you know, it does, if you're already doing, if you think about it, like you're doing weathering to your buildings, you're doing weathering to your rolling stock, that sort of thing, you know, that'll help give your figures a little bit more of a lived in feel than just, you know, even the pre-painted ones usually tend to look very, very bright and very bland, in my opinion. So again, the fellow with the tie here, Even though there's different colors at play here, I'm just going to use the brown here over everything. And it'll still pull together the details on the jacket. He has some coat pockets here, the shading around the tie, that sort of thing. And yeah, if you just give it a few minutes to dry, the shades do, because they're the wettest, they do take the longest to dry out of all of them. And again, if you have like a fan or something going, they'll dry even quicker. But those will be done, you know, inside 10 minutes. It'll be safe to handle them. So that's pretty much all I have. I'd be happy to keep talking about them and keep working. I do tend to paint for several hours straight when I do get painting, but certainly I don't want to keep you guys either. So yeah, that's pretty much the presentation. I've included a lot of material, as much I can think of, in the PDF, or not PDF, the Google Doc, for you guys to reference, print off, whatever you want to do. You know, but again, I've been using this system for, like I keep saying, most of 20 years. I've done a lot of models with it, and I think it is an asset to at least have a few of these, and certainly the shades you can put over pretty much anything, and it'll look great. So I hope that gives you guys another tool in your toolbox to get you a little further in your layouts.
Yeah, Alex?
Is there anything you do differently with metal figures than with plastic figures?
Just handle them more carefully, because the paint comes back off more easily. But otherwise, I generally just prime them and paint them all the same.
Was the magic mud the Newland oil or Nolan oil?
No, it's the Agrax Earth Shade, because it's
Okay.
It's kind of a brown sepia, but if you put it over metal, like something I've used it on is like bulldozer tracks, that sort of thing. You can slap it over almost any color, even skin tones, and it'll look pretty good. The Nuln oil is especially good for metals. So if you have any kind of metallic, I'm trying to think, that there were a few cars that actually had chrome bumpers, and I put a little bit of that on there just around, like they were 1950s cars with big fancy front bumpers, and I used just a little bit of that in the recesses, and it gave it a little more depth than just the shiny plastic. I think it was not plastic, it was the mini metals, and it just allowed me to pick out a little more detail and give them a little more depth, look a little less like die-cast cars.
Well, my comment is that just watching you paint, I can see in addition to your obvious talent, the thickness, if you will, seemed to really help with getting the paint where you wanted it to be and stay there, and not running all over the place.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with that. And it is, unless you really put that's why I use the syringe, because unless you really put a lot of water in it, you do have pretty good control over the viscosity of the paint.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally you have to put a ton of water in there before it gets too thin to really use. And even then, I haven't tried it in a long time, but I know a trick I used at least a few years ago was I pretty much just left the bottle open for a few hours, and it thickened up enough that I could use it again.
Alex, I have two questions.
Yeah.
The first question is, you showed us three different, or at least several different tips and brushes.
Yeah.
And where do you use those different tips for, or what areas? And then the second question is, on the different shades or washes there, do you use a different shade or wash based on the lightness or darkness of a color, or is it for a different effect that you use? How do you decide what shade to use where, or wash to use where?
So for the first question, generally I just use tip size depending on what how large of an area I'm trying to fill in. So for the fellows tie here, I use the let's see here. I use the smallest tip that I have on hand to get in to tie there. But then the rest of his jacket there, I did with the largest one I have on hand, and just block the colors in. So for me, it's really what area I'm working on determines what size brush I want to use.
So for a larger brush, use larger, and then for a small area. Now, when you have like a buckle that some very tiny on there, you just use that really small brush?
Yeah, so that's where I think I touched on about only using a little bit on the tip of the bristles. So that's where I would go in and just get, let's see, I'll use a bright color to demonstrate, and then I'll get back to your other question. So I would go in and use just, so this is the smallest brush, and then I would just carefully tease out just a little bit right on the, if you can see it there on the camera, just the tiniest bit. And then you do have, just as an example, you do have the ability to go in, and it looks like this guy has shirt buttons. So you can go in and just sort of tease that onto where you want. And I didn't do a great job there, but just as an indicator, that'll give you that sort of control to get details like belt buckles and that sort of thing. And for your other question, so generally I key off of the warmth of the colors. So skin tones, obviously I use the Whiteland flesh shade, but then cold colors I'll use the black. Warm colors I'll use the brown. And there's another color called Seraphim Sepia that actually, if I'd used that, would have looked even better with the yellow. It, you know, very, very warm colors it works well with. So I would just key it to, you know, what shade you use, just not necessarily the lightness or darkness of the color, but just whether it's warm or cold.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, again, I certainly don't want to keep you guys, but again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Stay as long as you like. You know, and I certainly hope this has been helpful.
I'll just throw in about the gaming stores. This is just for everybody. I've had to go in. I've gone into a couple of times with a nephew of mine, and like I say, they're good for these. They have a lot of good. They have a good paint selection, and they have like some hand tools, like tweezers and so forth, and a lot of brushes. So I mean, it's you can find stuff useful stuff in there.
Yeah, definitely. And so I do want to say regarding game stores, it really depends on that they are not all equal. It really depends on the individual operator. So I know there's a place called Huzzah Hobbies in Ashburn, Virginia, and it's a huge store, great selection. It's everything is clean, spit and polish. But there's also other stores out toward my area in Winchester, Virginia, that I shall not name, where you know you may or may not want to take a bath after you leave. So they're not all the same. If you can find a good location, you know you'll find some really good stuff. But you know I do want to warn you that there are some fairly dumpy game stores out there that aren't really going to have anything that's going to help you.
Alex, how about facial details? Maybe you don't need them in the HO figures so much, but some of your large war game figures might be a good example.
Yeah.
Do you do some facial detail?
Yes, I do.
See, I'm an O scaler.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think. Let me. I don't know how well it'll show up on the camera here, but let me duck into the other room and grab some stuff because I think that'll be a little closer to your O scale figures. I'll be back in just a moment. And I'm back. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Alex. It's been very inspirational.
Great. Glad to hear that. All right. So, Rich, to answer your question, just trying to find something here real quick. Because I realize these are somewhat dusty from sitting on a shelf for a year because I haven't been able to get out and actually do any gaming. So let's see if the camera can pick up on it here. So these are character figures. And so the way I did the face on these, and again, this is about as highly detailed as I'm personally willing to go. So you can kind of see here. Will he fit on the camera? Yeah, kind of. But especially on the guy in the middle here. So I started with a darker flesh tone. I want to say Bugman's Glow. And I built up a couple layers of precedingly brighter flesh tones. And then I went over it with the Whiteland Flesh Shade. I put a couple dots of Null Oil under the eyebrows to try to make the eyes a little bit darker. And then I went back over, after I did the shade on it, I went back and did a couple more highlights with even brighter flesh washes to really try to get as much definition on the face as possible. And it looks, let me see if I can angle the light here to try to give you a little more sense of the definition because the camera's kind of washing it out. The other figures here I didn't put quite as much work into. But this is for her. I think I used only one or two flesh shades, but I used the shade. I put a wash, like I painted in the skin color. I put a wash over that. I painted the skin color just on the highlights. I put another wash over that, and then went back and did a final highlight. So even using, let's say, what does it look like? I think I used Kislev Flesh on her and Whiteland Flesh Shade, but just by taking a couple passes and making sure to pick up on those highlighted areas, I was able to get a lot of definition to the face without going through the hassle I did on this fella back here. Again, just so when you, because if you put these on the tabletop, you know, you're usually standing 2 to 3 feet away from them. So if you can get that sort of definition that that jumps out at you 2 feet away, you know, it's going to look good without needing too very much effort.
Yeah, more than adequate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a trial and error.
A little bit. You definitely do need to experiment, and even like on these guys. They're done, and I'm not going to go through the hassle of painting them again. But you know, you're always learning stuff and thinking like, well, if I did it again, but I'm absolutely not going to. I would do it a little bit different, but you know, you just pass that on to the next one you do.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you guys.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Got to bounce.
Thank you.
I
very
learned a
much.
lot.
Yeah.
Thank you now.
Yep. Thank you.
Hey, Alex, I
Yeah.
have
I
one
want
more.
to thank you very much for doing this. It was a very, very nice program and very informative.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Alex,
Yeah.
I have another question. On the